I'm Matthew Head, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hack Show. In this episode, we're going to talk to Delwyn McKenzie, who's a music teacher from West Melton, New Zealand. Her passion for music started at a young age, as she grew up in a musical family and is the youngest of 5. She's developed her own piano course to assist young people in discovering music. This blends playing by ear with sight reading, and she uses the lessons she learnt as a young dyslexic person trying to learn music to facilitate this course. As always, I will post the show notes at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the Dyslexia Life Hacks show, I'd really appreciate it if you give us a review. As a new podcast, this really helps get in front of more people. I thank you and look forward to reading your reviews in advance. Welcome to the show, Delwyn.
It's really great to be here, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, no problem. I understand it's quite early in the morning with you, so it's late in the evening for me, but we've managed to make the time zones work.
Absolutely, yep.
So I thought we'd start off with finding out how you got into playing the piano.
Well, my parents were music teachers, so I didn't have a dog's show. It doesn't sound quite right, does it? But you know what I mean. If your parents are music teachers, you're going to have to learn as well. And so it was really half of it was by osmosis, I think. But my whole family were musical, and there were music pupils coming in and going out of our house all the time. So, and my parents were the family music. My parents were the local music teachers in the community, and they even had a caravan that they'd had a piano in the back, and they'd take it around the schools and country schools and have a studio for the students to come out of their school lessons to their piano lessons. So that was very innovative back in their day. So really we were just surrounded by it. But I did start when I was about 5, and my mother was my main music teacher. So students would come to lessons to the caravan and have there while they were at school. So that was the way they ran their business. And so I was just surrounded by music growing up. My mother was my music teacher, and probably my father was the encourager, although he was a music teacher as well. But when I look back, actually, I think it might have been my dad that I got my dyslexia from.
Right.
But really never really thought about that much at all growing up.
Okay.
Or knew about it.
So did they teach piano themselves, or were they just a broad plethora of instruments and you got to have a go at everything?
Well, they did both. They did. My mother was definitely a piano teacher, and my father taught a lot of brass instruments from his background. And with Salvation Army, he had a lot of brass background. So my mother was the main music teacher for piano.
Okay. And are you just a piano player now, or do you still involved in playing other instruments?
So I started on the piano and then went onto the violin, but I didn't really take to the violin because my sister was so brilliant at it.
How annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody used to ask, you're Helen's sister, do you play the violin? I said, yeah, really badly. So I went on to look for another instrument, and we had a trombone and a double bass lying around the house, as you do when your parents are music teachers. And
yes,
so I picked the double bass because I wanted to play in an orchestra one day. So double bass it was. And so I went on to study that at high school and then later at university. So I majored in the piano to start with, and then onto the double bass. And now I play a bit of cello, and so I basically teach piano and strings now.
Wow, okay, that's quite a fair selection, isn't it? It certainly keeps you occupied, particularly at the moment, I imagine.
Yeah, well, there's a good thing and a bad thing possibly about learning too many instruments. I probably haven't specialised as much, but jack of all trades, and means I'm adaptable to different situations. And like I teach a little orchestra of children and 27 little kids in a primary school here. Do you say primary school or do you say elementary school?
Primary school.
Primary school,
UK.
Okay. I thought, right, yeah. So I had to think about that for a minute. The wee orchestra I teach, when I'm teaching them to conduct, which is a fun class I do. I switch instruments with just about all of them except the brass and the clarinets and flutes, because that's not hygienic. But we swap instruments and they conduct and I play their instrument, And so they're all looking around to see if I'm doing any good.
Okay.
But that's one of the advantages of jack of all trades or master of none.
Yeah. You could be your own band if you're doing a recording session. You can do all the instruments, right? Can you sing as well?
No, actually, I'm not a great singer.
No.
No, that's a disadvantage.
Yeah. See, you can do it. You could do all the other instruments and just get somebody else to sing at the front there.
Yeah.
Wow, that is pretty impressive selection, and it's nice you've thrown your life into music. I thought we'd move on. Really, now we've sort of established how you've got into playing musical instruments, mainly piano. That sort of how you came to dyslexia, and sort of when you found out initially, or how you found out, more importantly, that you were dyslexic.
It was when my daughter was getting diagnosed at high school. She was struggling with some stuff at school. We knew that she had some issues at primary school, and we were living overseas when our kids were learning. And for her, I never really nailed it down. She seemed like she was good at reading, so I didn't spot it. Same with me, really. I was quite a good reader.
Oh, okay.
So that was definitely what put up a wall to my understanding until she got diagnosed, and I was about 40 at the time, 45 or something.
Oh, okay.
Something like that, in my 40s anyway. And she, at high school, was struggling. So we got the teachers actually recommended she had a dyslexia test, which she did. And the test came back showing one of the areas, and by the way, she's given me permission to talk about these things.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. My kids are incredibly supportive of me sharing what we've learned together.
Brilliant.
So that's wonderful.
That is really good.
Yeah, it is. And so when I looked at her report, one of the issues was processing. And for me, I looked at that and thought, that's interesting. So processing. And I looked to see what that involved. I thought, I relate to a bit of that. Okay. And then there were a few other things. As time went on, I realized, okay. Yeah, well, I'm creative. That's one of my big things. That seems to be but that could be general anyway, so you question these things. But then I struggled at school. I always felt like I was dumb. I always kind of thought I was doing, my best, but it never seemed quite good enough. And, I was never the top of the school, the group at school in terms of ability. So it seems I was terrible at maths, which interesting. I've heard you say that you, with your mechanic background, you're good with maths, right?
Yes, yeah. Being an engineer, I'm quite good with maths, but it's interesting you were quite good at reading and writing, and I really struggled with that bit. So I kind of gravitated towards, I could do calculus and do crazy stuff like that, but having to write a report was the hard bit for me.
Yeah, well, that's right. And interestingly enough, my son's an engineer too.
Oh,
so cool. he went on to be a mechanical engineer, and he is, and again, I didn't really pick his dyslexia until I was doing a seminar about music and dyslexia. We were talking about it, and my daughter had the main issues, but he's had some struggles too, which was interesting to talk about as well. So it's been an incredible journey of sort of discovering, that explains this and that explains that, and but it also explains, why I was learning things coming in the back door, as it were, and not necessarily doing them conventionally. For example, like when I was learning music, that was my mother would teach a very traditional approach, but I was more interested in playing by ear and things like that. So with my daughter's discovery, that was when I really first started finding out.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because quite a lot of people I've had on, I found out later on in life, and I found out as a 6-year-old. So it's quite interesting hearing the story where everything kind of drops into place for you. And quite a lot of people, it is parents who find out when their kids start being stable. And I imagine it's because times have changed since when you were at school to them now, and they start finding out it's more out in the open. But it sounds like you had that light bulb moment of, well, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense.
Definitely.
Did you find, post finding out yourself was dyslexic and going on a journey with your daughter, and it sounds like your son as well, that you changed anything about your approach to life and in general, in terms of how you would learn stuff and how you went past day-to-day tasks? You're like, oh, that's the dyslexia. I'll work out a better way of doing this. Now I understand what my mind does. I can find better ways to kind of fit in with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting question, because I think being older, I think it's not a terrifying thing. I think it's been a great thing, because it has been a lot more aha moments where I think, oh, okay, yeah, exactly like you say. You know, I'm kind of let's figure out what this looks like, because I'm affected that way, possibly. You know, especially when it comes to processing things. Yeah, I'm definitely a little kinder to myself, I think, when it comes to learning a new skill.
Nice, yes.
Because if I was in a new area, and that's where all this online stuff has been a little bit terrifying at times, because it's learning new skills over and over again. And I just kind of get a little bit overwhelmed with it. And so I thought, okay, back off, you know, start doing it one thing at a time, one step at a time. That sort of has definitely helped. Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah, I can imagine it. It must be a real eye opener. Do you think how learning your instruments when you were younger was affected by dyslexia? Like, any positive sides to it? And then we're going to any sort of barriers you feel might have been. Do you think it assisted in terms of helping learn a musical instrument?
You know, I really do think it does. And I think it helps more than people realise. And with the traditional way of learning, there's a lot of focus on that sight reading thing, that you've got to look at the note and read it. And so what happens is that when there's any dyslexia, you want to find any other way than having to track little black dots on horizontal lines. You know, it just isn't fun. And so you're looking for other ways to do that task. And so you cheat a bit, I suppose. And for me, it was probably, I did it, like I said before, about osmosis, having students coming in and having their lessons in our home. I probably learnt some of my pieces in a way by hearing other students playing them before I got to them in my book. And so when I came to learn them, I thought, oh, I remember hearing this one. So I was using my ears a lot more than tracking with my eyes. So my reading skills were not so great. But because my mother's method was about we're reading music, we're following this piece, and we're learning how to do sight reading for an exam. I was terrible at sight reading for exams, but that was all part of the process, you know. So I definitely looked for other ways to do things, and also I like to mess around with chords and things on the piano. So I'd figure out shapes and patterns visually and orally. Both of those things were fascinating to me and interesting to me. But the reading music was hard work.
Yeah. So would you almost go into exams? If I don't play the piano, although I did learn the intro to Bohemian Rhapsody for fun off of YouTube, just because it seemed like a fun thing to do in the piano.
Do absolutely.
Yeah, I was like, it's a piano here. I'm going to ding 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 ding.
Yep.
Yeah, because YouTube's a good tool for that.
Yep.
But if I understand correctly, when you're going through piano grades, you do in the UK, from what I understand, you have to go into, when you get into higher grades, and you have a piece of music, a sheet music in front of you, and you've got to play it. So
yeah,
how did you get around that? Because it sounds like you pretty much learn it by ear, and that's your kind of workaround. But when you're in the exam and haven't heard the piece of music before, and it's just on the sheet, what did you do then?
Well, thankfully, my mother did really reinforce the reading skills, whether I liked it or not. So even though I did my workarounds, I know that if I hadn't have been in that environment and if she wasn't my teacher, I probably wouldn't have gained the reading skills that I did gain. So that by the time I got into the exam rooms, I still was poor at it, but I didn't totally fail at sight reading. It was only 10 marks of the exam. So it affected me getting a good grade, but it didn't affect the overall grade because I played quite well when I had to perform my pieces. Although I've never been a great performer. I'm really better as a teacher.
Okay.
They have this saying. I don't know if you've ever heard it. Those who can do, those who can't teach. And
I have heard that. Yeah.
And there's another one. And those who can't teach, examine. So
all the examiners have just turned this podcast off.
No, it's an examiner. I heard that one from.
Right.
Okay. So I'm safe. But there's a little bit of truth to it. I mean, I've learned to perform and so on, but it's not my favorite thing. So when I was teaching our second son, just a little aside here, when I was teaching my second son, he picked things up brilliantly. He didn't have the dyslexia issues. He had just had a beautiful sense of the music. He just was amazing to pick things up really well. And he would be getting ready for a little recital, a performance or something. And I'd say, Isaac, you're not ready with this piece here. You haven't learned the trills. You haven't learned this. You haven't learned that. Don't worry, Mum. It's fine. Chill. I'm good. And he was. And I'd be sitting there biting my nails. And he'd look at the crowd and say, there'd be a kind of a watch this mentality going on in his head. And he'd nail it. So he was a totally different musician in a sense to me. And I was just awed by that because he was a better performer than I was. So I struggled with the performance side of things, but I loved the nuts and bolts of figuring things out and creating things and messing around on the piano,
So you touched on your son, Isaac, is not dyslexic. Was it the piano, the instrument you referred to him performing?
Yeah, he was. He was a pianist like the others. He learned piano like all my kids.
So you've got two dyslexic kids and one non-neurotypical child.
That's right.
So you can see firsthand the difference between how the three of them learn.
Yep, absolutely. Night and day.
How does that look? How do you, if you sit both your children down, the neurotypical one of the dyslexic ones next to each other, I think this is going to be great. How are you teaching the pair of them? If you're going to each one, what are you doing differently between them to make them come to the same level?
Well, I started at different levels for a start off. Isaac, I was teaching the Suzuki method, which is the method that starts children listening to CDs first. My mother actually was teaching this method later in her teaching career. So she was supporting me through this. And so the Suzuki method's amazing for the mother and the child working with the student.
Is that Suzuki? It's Suzuki method, right?
Yeah, Suzuki method, as in Suzuki motorbike,
It is that. I was checking that was what it was, yeah.
Yep. So Suzuki method, and it's fantastic for really starting children off by hearing the music. They hear it right from when they're babies, particular music, classical music played by very competent musicians. And they listen to that music as they're sleeping, as they're waking, whatever. It started in Japan. Mm-hmm. And my sister did a study of it when she was doing her music studies. And then my mother was very interested in it. So fairly early on when Suzuki music came to New Zealand, they were involved with it. So I was interested in teaching my children this method. So I would play these pieces, sit at the piano and play these pieces. And then my Fraser was not interested in learning the piano. This is my eldest son. Mm-hmm. He was around about 8 when Isaac was 4. And I'd been playing, partly because I hadn't actually done much with the Suzuki method when Fraser was a baby. We were in a different space doing different things. But when I had Isaac, I was sort of ready. So I was playing the piano and Isaac was 4 and Fraser was 8. Isaac said, "Mummy, can you teach me that?" And that was the moment we started teaching. So I would just teach him little parts of the pieces at a time, building on each piece all by ear. So he was learning these pieces by ear for a while. And we do note games and things to help with the reading thing. But that was, for me, one of the difficult sides of teaching the Suzuki method on my own, living overseas. I didn't have a group thing, which they encourage. And so my children didn't do very well on the reading side of things. And Isaac was starting to do well, and Fraser says, "Mum, can you teach me too?" So at age 8, I started him on the Suzuki method, but he really struggled with anything to do with the reading. And so we battled on, but looking back, I think I should have had a completely different method for him. And also my daughter Esther. They were very different learners. I mean, even between Fraser and Esther, Esther could remember things. She would over practice something, learn it really well, and she'd remember it for life. She could still sit down and play these pieces, some of them quite well. Whereas Fraser would forget them. Isaac could remember them. So, I mean, there were such different things going on. And I realized as I grew as a music teacher too, that you've really got to understand somebody's learning style before you can teach them. And so I've really looked into that quite a bit, and how are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? What are what is it? Touch? Is it? So what are the things that push their buttons?
Yeah. Because there is a very good point there, isn't it? You got oversimplified, one neurotypical child, 2 dyslexic childs, but all 3 of them, because they're 3 different people, need the learning customized to their own personality. But I think I sympathize with your oldest, having learned things and then forgetting them later on. It's like you commit them to short-term memory, but squashing them over to the long-term sometimes is a problem. So just learning quick things. It's interesting how, for me, it was always a different method to get it pushed into the long-term.
Yeah, I think I really relate to that too. And I notice he uses Google a lot. He'll be, or he's good at finding his information he needs for the moment.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah. It's just in time information rather than storing it in memory banks forever.
Yeah. And so, that whole different way of them learning was what fascinated me. And I still love the Suzuki method. I think it's got some fantastic ways of coming about things. And so I was looking for a way to transition kids. So what would happen? What was fascinating to me is that if they learned to play really good stuff, which they did at a very young age. And anybody that becomes a really good pianist often has a Suzuki background. Around about the same time as my son was learning, my mother was teaching a boy the same age who went on to become an international pianist. And so it was interesting to compare how these 2 boys in their journey, mine and her pupil. And the thing that Isaac took with his music was that because of its auditory, he later went on to jazz school. And they said, really, do we have a classical pianist who can fit into the jazz scene? But because he had great technique at playing softly, he just didn't thump away, which most people coming in their teens, good at thumping, not good at playing softly. But the classical training taught him to play softly. So he actually did really well at jazz school because of that. Whereas those who came to jazz school with a traditional approach only sort of thing struggled to pick up by ear. So so that was very fascinating. But the problem is that when a child learns to play by ear first, if you want them to go back and learn the basics of reading music really well, that's baby stuff. They don't want to go back to that. And it's really hard work to actually learn. You learned Bohemian Rhapsody at first, but that sounded really good. You did not want to go back to playing Old MacDonald Had a Farm just so you could learn how to read music after that, right?
Yes. I remember I picked up a guitar as a teenager. One of my best friends from school was playing it, and I was in a big Metallica phase at the time. So I bought the tab book for the Black Album, learned how to do Enter Sandman. It's like, what does PM mean? And that's palm muting. Right, I could play James Hetfield's bit. Cool. And then as I sort of got older, I went to college and then got a job, my musical taste changed into, I still like Metallica now, but more other stuff. I just thought, damn it, I'm going to have to go learn chords again, and never touched it until actually picked it back up in 2019, which was quite useful when 2020 gave me a lot of time to practice.
Right.
And went back to basics, because I thought I've got to learn all the chords, the bar chords and stuff, because I can't just keep going, wow, making lots of noise with an electric guitar. And I actually wanted to be able to strum along with an acoustic guitar, but I remember it sort of was like early 20s being like, well, I want to kind of strum along to a stereophonics track or whatever, but I'd be learning into Sandman, and it sounds cool with the Marshall amp cranked up. But how do I go back to the kind of chord stuff that some of the other sort of softer songs are? Yeah. So it's interesting, really. I think I'd skipped a lot of that each year. I could do the chords of next, but actually hadn't really solidified it all.
And isn't that interesting? Because when you're a child, you don't want to learn all that, baby stuff. And so some of the material that I was using was kind of, especially when you've got kids who are just coming into their, 12-year-old, 11-year-old group, if they haven't learned something really cool before they're 11, then it's not cool, to start learning, some of this babyish stuff. So finding the right material is that people can learn those basics well. Yes. And do both playing by ear and reading music is something I've really come to see is super helpful. Yeah, so I really wanted to find a way to bridge kids to that reading skill without having to, learn to a high degree and then go back to learning the basics. So that's partly where it's what really got me started writing my course. Yeah.
I think that makes sense. And you've got to keep the fun aspect in, and the fun aspect is playing stuff But that does bring me nicely to your course. What do you feel is sort of different about your course compared to other piano courses that are out there? And how did you sort of come to form it? I think we kind of started touching the early bases of that. It sounds like we've built the building blocks to how you come to form it already.
Yeah, well, it was really my kids. They've been fantastic. And so when we were living overseas, when I was raising them, we got back to New Zealand in 2004, and I had been teaching when we were overseas. I really started my music school in 2004, and also was teaching at a government school with about 6 schools in their music program. So around about that time, I started doing quite a bit of teaching of beginners at this government school, because when they reached 12, they went on to high school, and the program finished there for those children in that school. So we would have a natural attrition every year of new kids coming through. So I got to see, because I was the piano teacher and I hired tutors to do other instruments. So I took on the piano students. The thing was, the piano students were all starting at the beginning stage. I'd have a book that I was using, and it just became inadequate in a way. I got used to it and I adapted it, and I thought, if I was doing this, I'd go about it a different way. Never mind. Well, whatever. Then I went to a music teaching seminar with music teachers, I don't know, about 6 years ago, something like that, and came back home and was sharing with my family. My son was there at the time, and I said, it's really interesting seminar. And she was great, and she was a musician I respected, but I was a little surprised at a number of the things that she talked about. Well, I do that. Well, I do that. Well, I do that. Yeah, I'd write things like that too. And Fraser said, Mom, you could write your own course. And so that's where it began. And so he said, I'll get an illustrator, you put the pieces together. And so over about a year, I suppose, I used some of the pieces that I'd written for students, but I started, putting things together. What would I want in a course? And what are the things I felt were lacking in the books? And I didn't realize that I was actually picking things that I preferred from the way I learned. Mm-hmm. Things like one of the things that irritated me as a teacher was that the lesson page would often have a duet part for the teacher at the bottom of the page and the students' music above that. And that's all very easy for the teacher, very conveniently done. Great idea. Bad idea for the student. They look at that page for the first time and it's just a whole lot of little black dots and horizontal lines. And half of it's not relevant to them. And so I didn't want my pages to look messy.
Right.
So that's one thing. That's just one thing. I didn't want my pages to look messy. I didn't want music to sound trite at the beginning. I wanted it to sound like I'm a real musician from the beginning. And I also wanted to have duet parts that weren't so fancy that an older sibling couldn't play them, or mum who had a little bit of training at piano. And I also made those duet parts, some of the pieces that were early duets I made into the left hand and later pieces, so that they actually learn in the second book. There are 3 pieces from the first book that are what the tutor part was. So the kids feel great about playing that duet tutor parts sort of along with their music. So there were things like that. That's just a few of the things that I valued. The other thing is often music books are written by musicians, and they'll get a lyricist to come and help them, or they'll write the lyrics themselves. And fortunately, I have this brilliant husband. He's a great writer. He writes beautiful poetry and has written to lyrics to songs I've written in the past. Wrote 6 musicals while we were living overseas. So he wrote all the lyrics and did all the scripts for them. And so together, and the thing is, he likes to have the music first and puts the lyrics into that. I don't do that. If I ever write a song, I like it the other way around. So it's amazing we ever wrote a song together. But anyway, he was perfect for this course because I would say, I want to teach this technique with these notes and in this pattern. And I'd write a little piece and I'd say, can you give me some lyrics for that? And he would do these just brilliant little lyrics that would sit perfectly alongside with them, like silly little example, or should I say great little example. One of my pieces is called Cloudy Days, and cloudy days, the sky looks sad, like it likes to cry drops. I think that's the first line. And he had an octave leap from the cry to drops. Just, he put those words with that melody, which was already making that leap, but he put those words into it.
Right, cool. That's quite good, because you got like a holistic thing then with music that sounds great, and then lyrics to go along if other people want to come in. You've also got, as you said, the challenge for the partner who's helping them out. It's not to a high grade, so it all kind of comes together. Which is great. So do you find that it's more neurotypical people or neurodiverse people tend to come to it? Because I kind of understand from a neurodiverse kind of point of view with having a page that's a lot more simpler rather than, oh my God, because I know what I'm like with seeing all that information. My brain's like, what's this bottom bit do? How do we do the bottom bit? And like, get somebody to play the bottom bit if I was being taught. Well, how do I do that? And it's like, no, you don't do that until later on. So actually not having it in the page makes really good sense.
Yeah, they don't even know when they're doing the first book that they're actually going to learn that later on. They don't have it. They don't know. That's just a kind of fun thing that happens later on. You remember in your first book, we played this piece.
Yes. But
you're going to play the part that I played with you this time. And they feel very cool about that. That's just a cool thing. Sorry, I lost track there. What was the question?
It's fine. I was asking whether you get more neurotypical people on your course or neurodiverse, or if there's any split at all, or is that you're aware of?
Well, I think probably the first, neurodiverse. I think we get more of those first up. But then you get those who have a child who's tinkering away at the piano and they think, oh, must get them piano lessons. So, so that's how how I get both kinds, really. You'll get some that say a child should learn music. I've read somewhere it's good for their brain. So we track them off to piano lessons. Yes. I don't know how this works because I'm not a musician, but I'll take them to a music teacher. So there's that. Or there's, I've seen my child, they really pick up a piece. They've been learning Bohemian Rhapsody on piano from YouTube, which actually is really one of those cases of, okay, so I'm going to take you back to something basic and you're going to think I'm a terrible teacher, but never mind, we'll get past that.
Yes, got to get through the entry levels before you can take on the big stuff. Yeah.
I can play this piece. You mean to say you can't teach me something better than that? No. So
yes.
Yeah, and that's where I find my pattern pieces. I have two parts of my course. I have the reading aspect, and then I have the playing by ear, creative side of things, where they don't have any music to read, but they'll play a little piece that is going to help them with some of the skills they're going to need when they're reading as well.
Because you mentioned about the hand movement. I remember in an early email we had sort of planning this, that you kind of learn sort of patterns with the hands, or have I misinterpreted that?
No, I have patterns. So, for example, I'll teach at the very beginning. I have little pattern pieces that I have them play on the black notes. I've got one which is a very simple mashup, and even using the term mashup is cool for some kids, of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Mary Had a Little Lamb, which I call Mary with a Twinkle, and it's all on the black notes. And it's just, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then Mary Had a Little Lamb comes in next, and then we go back to Twinkle. And so it's just one little piece, but it combines those two familiar melodies, all on the black notes. But then I might teach them to a wave when we're doing a sea story. I've got a couple of pieces near the beginning of my course where I use some imagery around the sea, a boat on the sea, and this note looks like a boat on the sea. You can see it on the top of the lines there. Imagine it's a boat. So I use some imagery to help them learn some of the notes. Yes, and then I have a piece called Wave, which is a pattern piece, where they go on the black notes and make a kind of a wave going up, going down. And I use a different rhythm that they're going to use to count later with. So the pattern pieces give them a break from the reading music, and they learn them by memory. They watch me, they listen, and I'll teach them with a combination of visual and auditory learning.
But that's still getting them to learn the hand skills and the proper finger placement without them really realising it is kind of the theory. Yeah. Excellent. So you've kindly offered a few free lessons to any listeners. I will put the link to the website in the show notes, which, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. You'll need to put in a coupon code to access it. Do you want to tell us what that is?
So 5 notes free, all in caps there, number 5, then notes free. And that's all in uppercase.
Okay, so that's a couple of lessons from your beginner course to get a taste for how your methods work.
Yeah, actually that encompasses those two lessons. One is called Sea Story, and the other one is called Bobbing on the Sea, talking about that bobbing note of the note B at the top of the stave. But it uses the notes, first 5 notes of that we learn with a little story to visually see those notes on the stave.
That is really clever. It's I think this is we've not sort of pulled it out, but quite a lot of what you explained to me does sound like somebody with dyslexia pulling out ways around learning it. Like I can see in my head the stave with the boat floating on it going B, and you've even said bobbing, so the word even begins with that, which I'm pretty certain is intentional. But I've noticed a few things, modelling up meanings of words, different methods. Like David's method uses that. I've got somebody coming on soon about dyscalculia. They use visual skills to learn numbers and maths. So it's interesting how we are visual thinkers. So we end up converting even cold kind of the music stage with all the crotchets on it. You can shoot me if I get this wrong, aren't you?
No.
with all
no
that
dumb
on,
questions, no dumb statements.
No. Yeah, thank you. Guitar player, I don't know theory. Come on. So just make noise. But you got to stay with all the crotchets on it, and then actually you've converted that into images. So then it starts, as we know, picture thinkers. All the images come in really fast. It's like right boat V. What other images do you have for that? You don't have to give me the full course, but I'm curious to see what you have for like a G or something.
Well, a G, I'll say to them, like that's in the treble. If we're thinking of the G in the treble clef, I'd say that imagine that's on a string of beads, and it's going to slide across the line, and it's going to go right into the curl of the treble clef, because that names the G line. The treble clef names the G line. So there's your string of beads. Just imagine that semi-brief's going to go right across into that curl.
It says, and it looks like a G. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the F clef is it's got a couple of dots there, but it looks like a fish hook, doesn't it? So there's our fish hook, and it names the F line. So we come along there, and that F in the base is going to be an F fish. So
brilliant.
Yeah, so I think that does help with that. The other thing that helps, sometimes I've had students where their reading skills aren't great, but they want to sing the song that goes with it, and so they've got the notes are there tracking along, and so they want to get to sing the song, which is really important that the song is not trite. We went out for tea, come with me. The words are good in that way. So they're not embarrassed to sing the songs, but they're actually reading them as well.
Oh, that's clever. Do you find anything with timing or anything is tricky with a dyslexic person?
Yeah, that's often a tricky one. One of the things I've got in my first book, I've got a little piece called Walking Around the Zoo, and one called Running Around the Zoo. And when we're teaching the walking one, that's crotchets. So we can, when I get to they learn they're already playing crotchets, but there's that teaching that sense of walking. And we've got a couple of old storks grandpa's looking for a seat as he's walking around the zoo. And then we get to running around the zoo. If I sense that there's going to be some difficulty learning quavers, I might say, let's do the first bar where the rhythm is running, 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 running. And then the next bar is in crotchets. So we go running, 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 walk, 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 running, run, before we actually put the words in, or even start learning how to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So, so that kind of takes away from the learning it as numbers and bits and pieces, if that's going to be an issue. For some kids, it's not. So it's just a matter of picking that up by the time they get to that stage.
Yes, I see. So, and that really just varies kid to kid rather than dyslexia or non-dyslexia.
Which is one of the things I really wanted with my course. If I've got an older child learning this, I'll get them to do this extra thing with this piece, or I'll leave that out for this one. They're a little bit young to take that. But the basic piece will still be fine for most kids,
Excellent. So you alluded to earlier that obviously with the COVID outbreak, we are recording this in September 2021, and I think New Zealand are currently in a lockdown. You've moved online. How are you finding that, trying to teach your methods online versus in person?
Well, I'm new at it, so it's early stages for me. I think the concept is still pretty new for some people. There are others. I've got one student his mum actually doesn't have much to do with his lessons. It seems like they've signed him up, and he's doing it. He's interacting with me, and he's about 10, I suppose. And that's interesting because he's sending in, because I offer as part of my course, you can send in a recording of you playing one of the pieces each section, and I'll give you some feedback on it on your personal playing of it. So that at the moment I'm offering that. When it gets a bit bigger, which I suspect, could get a bit out of hand, I might have to adapt to that or get some help. But at the moment, I'm offering that. So that's one of the advantages of being, just kind of launching out there. I'm giving a lot of help to make sure that my course is working. Because the course is basically a PowerPoint sort of look to it with voiceover PowerPoint with the little thingy moving around the screen as well. But that's for the reading part of the course. And then I've got total visuals of the auditory pattern pieces that they just simply watch, copy and learn, just as if, I was doing that in the lesson. So that's how I teach the course, so that they can keep playing it as many times as they like, each lesson until they've got it. And follow along with that. So how it's going? Yeah, I think people are still like the idea of a one-on-one teacher.
Yes,
and so the idea of learning an instrument with in an online course setting, I think it may still need some of one-on-one with it, but my feelings were at the beginning that I want this to be available for people who are in isolated situations, who don't have access to a teacher. And a lot do have access to teachers. You can have fully online lessons. So, which I'm not offering as such. It's the course. If you want online lessons, you can get in touch and book them on top of that. Yeah. And I think, I want to be able to offer that for people. If they want to use my course, I want to make sure it works for them. I mean, I've got one person who lives in Papua New Guinea and no contact with anyone. She's really, loved having my course for all her kids and being able to interact by email. But she's a musician as well. So she's kind of wanted a tool that she was happy to use, that she had some clues about. So it's probably going to work for people who've got a bit of a musical background, so that they can kind of track it a little bit better. Yeah, but even those who don't, I think they could do fine with it.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a gateway drug, isn't it? Like Fender Play, the guitar lesson app, got really, really popular over lockdown, as well as just selling guitars and stuff in general. But I think you do get, I've done it, you get to a point where, you learn all the basic theory, but actually that's the gateway drug. And then you can actually bang out tunes that sound pretty good and you understand some of the scales and theories and chords behind it. But I would think having a teacher would help you with the little stuff like, because we all do it, don't we? We think we're playing in time and we think we're playing it right until somebody goes, what are you playing?
Or things like, actually that little sign there means you have to rest. That means that the music has to pause. There's no sound at that point. You don't just keep banging through the notes,
Yes.
Is that what it means? And I thought, so I explained that. Okay, obviously, maybe that's something I need to look, so I've tried to look at every angle, but, it's still getting feedback from people is helping me as well as I adjust the course as we go along. So
yeah, lets you iterate and improve your course, which is quite good. And I imagine that will feed into your in-person teaching once you're allowed to do that again.
Well, actually, I have been doing in-person Zoom lessons. So
Zoom.
All my students just went straight onto Zoom. So it was actually a bit of a frantic time. But Auckland, our main city in Auckland, is still on lockdown. In Christchurch here, we're back to normal in-person. You have to wear a mask if you go to public places.
Right.
But at schools, we don't have to wear a mask. In my home, we don't have to wear masks. So we're back to normal. And in that sense, and oh my goodness, the kids are so glad to be, back to normal.
Yes, I
can't imagine what it's like to be on these long-term lockdowns. It's awful. Yeah.
Yes. I can imagine. It's particularly at that young age where it's the kind of key routine of your year, isn't it? Coming into school and having face-to-face. It's got to be really tricky, which thank God for Zoom and things like that. We can actually keep some of the interaction going.
Yeah.
And you can still teach piano, and we've got really good at pub quizzes on a Friday night.
Is that right? Yeah. Oh, golly. Yeah.
I'm going to round the podcast out with a few of my kind of standard questions. So these are kind of quick questions from me, but they don't need quick answers from you. The first one is, what prejudice do you have about dyslexia that you have proven wrong or has been proven wrong to you?
Well, probably the top of the list was I'm not dumb. I remember before I realised the dyslexia part of my journey, after I'd written maybe 4 or 5 of these musicals with my husband, talking to a special education person at the school where our kids were learning. And I said, of course, I struggled with school. I said to her, I was never very good at school when I was there. She said, really? I said, no, it's terrible. And she said, but you've written these musicals. And I said, I know, well, music's my thing. She says, yeah, you've got that music intelligence. And I said, oh, is that a thing? And then she talked about 7 different intelligences. You've got and then she started talking about the sports one and the music one and the maths one and the linguistic one. I thought, well, that's a nice way to think of it.
Yes.
So that was the first indication that I had, really and honestly, in my own thinking. That was the first time I thought, maybe I'm not dumb. And I already had a music degree by that stage. But I didn't really, I still was not a great student. So I still put myself in the dumb category. And it's taken me a long time to realise, you know what, I'm actually not dumb. Yeah.
Yes. So you're preaching to the choir on that one. It's it is really hard, the kind of negative self-beliefs and assumptions you make about yourself because your kind of school system and formal education didn't necessarily work, and how you can carry that into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s unless you have some sort of intervention or go study a course and get partway through it and I'm still here. Cool.
Yes.
Clearly I do fit in with these people. Yeah. And it's one of the drivers behind some of this podcast is actually having people like yourself on and other dyslexics can hear it like, well, okay, we still have things we can bring to the world and certainly not stupid at all or dumb.
Yeah. And you know what? My parents were incredibly supportive. They were fantastic people. But dyslexia was not known, I don't think, even through, it wasn't talked about or understood in the way that we understand it now, I don't think. And, you just recognise that some people were good at reading music, some people weren't. And that was part of it. And when I got my music degree, my mother did not even expect me to have done a music degree, which was, I made a comment, I never expected to get a music degree. And she said, no, I didn't either, which sadly stuck with me. But I know she didn't mean it badly.
Yeah.
I know she didn't mean it badly. And I think now, because she was a good teacher and she really wanted to give me that skill. And she really wanted to see us all excel. But we all her kids did differently with music. And all of mine did too. So that in itself is a fascinating study. And I think that the reason I got my music degree in the end was because I started out learning the double bass simply because I could get free double bass lessons if I signed up for the music degree. And in Christchurch, they had lessons.
Good motivator for a young person. They're free.
Yes, and I'd been playing in the Auckland Youth Orchestra, and I heard that they had bass tuition as part of a music degree in Christchurch. So that was one of the reasons I moved to Christchurch area and started these lessons, really enjoyed them. Then I discovered that, you know what, there are other courses and I can do that I think I'd be interested in. I could do composition. I've done harmony at school. So, all these other music courses. And then I realized I'm doing well at these courses that I took on. And I started doing them part-time. So I did my degree over 6 years, part-time. But I kept thinking I'm never really going to finish the degree. And so I left all the worst subjects to the last, like third year harmony and third year composition and second year counterpoint or something that I had to do.
All the bits you don't like. Yeah.
But by that time, I was already doing well in these other areas. And so that gave me a foundation to, say, I think I can do this, But it really began very small. And I didn't really have the vision that I was actually going to finish the degree. I didn't feel that I would. I just thought I was learning some stuff that I was interested in at the beginning. And that was quite good because it wasn't as threatening as I'm going to do a degree. It was, I'm picking away at things I like here. And that was really helpful. And I switched from studying double bass. Halfway through, I actually had some, I realized I was probably not going to be a famous double bass player because I was a bit small. I'm short. And so choosing the double bass was probably maybe not my...
I can see the visualization is quite funny in my head of this big double bass.
Well, I sat on a chair.
Yes.
But I still play it. I still do play the bass in a local orchestra, and that's great. But I went on to do composition, and I remember saying to my mother, you know what? If I hadn't have done that messing around that irritated you at the piano as a child, I would never have done composition. It was the messing around that enabled me to be a composer.
Because you're hearing stuff and trying, hit a run of notes and hit glunk, note, try this again into somewhere else. Yes.
Loved it. Yeah. Absolutely loved it. Yeah. So that whole thing of being dumb was definitely the big thing that's changed. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, completely. The dumb thing is really annoying, isn't it? So my next question is, how would you describe dyslexia now if an alien come down and asked you what it was?
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's a tool that you could a tool in your toolbox, if you like, that's going to help you with thinking outside the square.
Yes.
Because I think I think a lot of my learning has been round the back door, round the other way, not quite the way somebody expected it to be. But then that's where the creativities come. When I was sharing some of my ideas with some music teachers, I made the comment that why does every piano book have a clunky C chord that we all have to learn? Why the key of C to learn a C chord? It just sounds heavy, clunky, and unmusical. And it was kind of like, yeah, it does in those beginning books. So, so why not introduce that, when you're in a different key, in the key of G, when it's up higher and it doesn't sound as clunky, And I had noticed some of these things from the Suzuki method, that they chose musical arrangements, and some of these things, figured when they taught the C chord, it was up high as well. But a lot of other reading books. Anyway, so yeah, sidetracked.
As I say, I feel like we could go into a rant about music books for hours.
Yeah, probably.
So my final question, really, and of course, being the Dyslexia Life Hacks show, any dyslexia life hacks?
This I had to ask my son what, give me an idea of what do I do that's a life hack, And so even the term, I wasn't, I'm getting the idea. But the thing that I've been doing a lot lately, especially doing the online stuff, is I've been struggling with new material, learning how to do new things and so on. So I'm easily distracted. I think, I'm going to do this today. Oh, actually, I'd rather read this email from so-and-so, or I'd rather do whatever it might be. And then I get to, and I realize I didn't get done what I planned. And what I heard somewhere, I don't know where, put a timer on. And it has just been so good. I'll say, okay, I'm going to put a timer on for 15 minutes shut out everything else, turn off the phone, no emails, nothing else is allowed to happen in this 15 minutes. And then I'm going to go and get a coffee. And and I'm not allowed that until I've done 50 minutes on this topic. I don't have children around that are little or anything like that. So, when I've got the time or space, I can do that. And it really made a big difference to my productivity. So just kind of being able to cancel out the other noise. So that's definitely something I find really helpful. I don't know if it's a dyslexia thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is being late, not on time, is that a thing? Or is that just life?
I think more personality.
Personality, okay.
Yeah. I have heard sometimes it can be a neurodiverse thing. It's not for me, but I don't know. Sometimes I've got various stuff that I do that I realise is me mitigating other stuff I don't do. So I'll get there early because I struggle with the processing of going in a rush and taking the information in where we're going. So I like to get there early to work it all out. So
okay. Yeah.
It might be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my daughter has spatial things. She doesn't know which way's up or how long it takes to get somewhere, or she definitely has some different issues with. She doesn't know where north and south is. Mind you, that's hard in Christchurch. We live out on the Canterbury Plains, and you need to know where the mountains are and things. But yeah, that's that spatial thing. I don't think I've got that as a difficulty. But anyway, getting somewhere on time was something I've struggled with, but I'm better at it now. I just always thinking ahead, a bit like you, planning ahead. If I know that I'm leaving 15 minutes earlier, there are always things I'm bound to have forgotten. So
yes, that's it. I will. If I have to leave somewhere in a hurry, or like if I'm going away and haven't packed my bag the night before, I can't trust my memory in the morning. I'll turn up like, where's my jeans? Oh, no. Quick run round to the shop. So, you have to kind of sometimes learn your own, mind pathways. A bit, don't you? Yeah. Okay, I think that's the kind of nice place we'll stop. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we sign off?
No, it's just been so great to chat with you, Matthew. Actually, is it Matt?
Matt or Matthew, I really don't mind.
Matthew. Oh, okay. Well, it's been really nice to talk with you, and it's been a pleasure to learn from you, actually, from your show. And
thank you.
I'm going to keep learning more from the different people you have on your show as well.
Yes.
And it's been a fantastic help to me on my journey. So thanks so much for having me on. And
that's okay. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, and I really hope that if your listeners do want to take advantage of that little wee part of my course and want to get in touch with me and talk to me more about it. I'm a pretty friendly person, I think, and just want people to enjoy their music learning and not have it as a massive struggle. It shouldn't be. It should be enjoyable. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. It should be fun. I mean, learning instruments is fun and also expand your brain at the same time. And who knows, somebody might do your course and be the next number one pianist for all we know.
Never know.
Okay, so as mentioned, you can get some free lessons. I'll put the links in the show notes at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. The coupon code you'll need to put in on the website is the number 5, and then all in capital letters, notes free. I will also put that in the show note description. I want to thank everybody for listening and see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.